Good morning, everyone. How are you? I hope that you are off to a wonderful start for an amazing day today. We are, thank you for joining in again for another episode of Read with Me. Today we are at Genesis 26, and we are looking at um, now the patriarch Isaac. If you remember that name in Hebrew, uh, Yitzhak. And we are looking at Isaac and some of the situations that he goes through in, I suppose you could call these early years, considering not youth, but early years, we'll say. And so we're going to look at a few stories concerning situations with him, as far as promises that are confirmed. Um, we see a cycle of things occur. And then we see some situations with wells, a lot of wells today. So a lot of content to read today as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Father, I thank you for your people on this beautiful day. I pray that as we read your word, that our hearts are enlightened, uplifted, instructed, guided, encouraged, informed. I ask your blessing over today's reading. May you add a blessing to the reader, hearer, and doer of your word. We give you glory today and thank you for this morning. In the mighty name of your son, Yeshua, we pray. Amen. We're going to go ahead and get started so that both of us, you and I, can get moving with this day that we've been blessed to see. Let's get going. We are at Genesis 26, and it reads as follows. Now there was a famine in the land, besides the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham. So Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, king of the Philistines. Now, if you remember, we have uh, we have dealt with King Abimelech before. Take that down so that's not blocking. We have dealt with this king Abimelech before. We'll talk about him a little bit more. It says now there's a famine or ra'av, which means hunger. So there's a famine in the land. Beside, and this is separate from the one that occurred uh, with Abraham. It says the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Mitzrayim or Egypt. Stay in the land of which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your descendants I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to your father Abraham." And just in case you don't remember, back in Genesis 22, this is the promise that was made to Abraham when he believed Elohim and uh, concerning his son. Um, and so this is what was promised to him. Abraham called the name of that place, "The Lord will provide," as it is said to this day, "In the mount of the Lord it will be provided." Verse 15 said, "Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. Indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your seed shall possess the gate of your enemies. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have obeyed my voice." Okay. All right. So that was what was promised. So we just took that quick look back to look at that real quick. And now we're going to go ahead and push forward. Uh, Back to Genesis 26, verse 4. And it reads, "I will multiply your descendants." Now, this is the promise that is being established with Isaac. This is the a continuation. We started with the promise that was made to Abraham. We just reread that, and now here we are hearing those promises uh, being reaffirmed for Isaac. And what is, one of the things that we like to do along the way is as we're reading, as we're going through, looking for things to think about during the day, meditate on during the day, uh, to be mindful of during the day. And so, one of the things that we can look at is, you know, um, how things can um, be with our relationships and helping our children shape their relationships, or helping those people that are connected to us, how their lives are affected by what we do. And here we see there was a promise made to the dad to bless the family because of the dad's obedience. And we're going to see how that plays out in the life of the child. So he says, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven, and will give your descendants all these lands, and by your descendants all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So this isn't even yet about what Isaac has done. This is about the promise that was attached to him because of his obedience. Now, as we move into this next section, we're going to visit this king again. Remember, we looked at him. Abimelech is how that name would be pronounced in the Hebrew script. Abimelech. Melech is father, or father is king. And this gentleman is there's believed to king during the time of Abraham and Isaac. We've seen both of them are Isaac is about to have a similar situation as his father. But then we also see there is another Abimelech, or Avimelech, king, who's king during David's timeline. And so, looking at a few uh, sources, there is a belief that either, of course, the name was just used again, or it might possibly be a title instead of a name, sort of like Pharaoh. Pharaoh wasn't that person's name, it was the position that they held. It was the position of king over a ruler over Egypt, or Mitzrayim, as we talked about. And so it may very well be a title similar to that. But for the purposes of our story today, he is Avimelech, and we are going to use that as his name today. So Isaac lived in Gerar, and that's a city in the Philistine area. Says when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, "She is my sister." Have we heard that before? Hmm. For he was afraid to say, "My wife," thinking they're in italics, added in for understanding. The men of the palace might kill me on account of Rebecca, for she is beautiful. Now, have we heard that fear past before? Yes, we can pass on a great inheritance, but we can also pass on fear. We can also pass on patterns. We can also pass on, behaviors, because your kid's been their whole life with you. And so there are some things that are learned behavior that we end up calling them things like generational curses, when in fact they are behaviors that may that may mirror those things, but really it's a learned pattern. It's a learned behavior. Like, what are we teaching our young people by the way that we live, the way that we talk, the way that we walk? Yes, it's possible for us to teach them faith and fear. And in this situation, we see the exact same fear that he had, and it may not have been, misfounded, the concern, but it's interesting that he chooses to handle it exactly the way that his father did, with the same people, no doubt. And it came about when he had been there a long time that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out through a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was caressing his wife Rebekah. Says then Abimelech called Isaac and said, "Behold, certainly she is your wife." He's seen this thing before. If this is the same king, he has seen this before. So then he says, "How then did you say she is my sister?" And Isaac said to him, because I said I might die on account of her. Abimelech said, what is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. So, so Abimelech charged all the people, saying, he who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Because, hey, he remembers before. Remember, everybody got shut down because of Sarah. And so he remembers. And so it says, now Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. And Yahweh blessed him. And the man became rich and continued to grow richer until he became very wealthy. For he had possessions of flocks and herds and a great household, so that the Philistines envied him. Philistines envied him. Now all the wells which his father's servants had dug in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines stopped up by filling them with earth. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are too powerful for us. So we've seen this before as well, where there's so much wealth, there's so much prosperity, there's so much abundance, that what's going to be best for all of us is that we separate. Remember, we talked about knowing when it's time to make that separation. Not that we're putting ourselves in the story, but sometimes I think it's good to find those principles that were present in previous stories that you can apply in situations of your own. So we see this prosperity has caused them to need to separate. So Abimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you are too powerful for us. And I mean, you've also got to be concerned about safety as well. And so for the sake of his people, this person living amongst us, becoming stronger and stronger. Yeah, we probably need to put some distance between us for safety as well. And Isaac departed from there and camped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Then Isaac dug again the wells of water which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, for the Philistines had stopped them up after the death of Abraham, and he gave them the same names which his father had given them. Now remember this piece, and remember we talked about this the last time when we were looking at those wells. You remember the word that we used there for that, air, exactly. Yes, wells. Remember, his father had dug those wells, but there was also the ground that he purchased. And notice the ground that he purchased later, as we see, they're going to continue to have access to that with no problems. But these wells become points of contention. We're going to see that a little bit later on. But these wells become points of contention. And we see here some of the wells that his father had dug up. The people had closed them off once Abraham was no longer alive. But when Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found there a well of flowing water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with herdsmen of Isaac, saying, the water is ours. So he named the well Esek, which means strife or contention, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well and they quarreled over it too. So he named it Sitnah, strife. And so we see already here, he's going through it with these wells. He's going through it with these Ba'er, and they become points of contention. So much so that, as a reminder, this well is one is called strife. Both are, one is strife and contention, the other is strife. And it says here he moved away from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So that's his signal. I've moved out far enough that I'm no longer there. There's no longer strife. There's no longer confusion, because I've found a way to apparently separate to a distance, separate in a way that's going to allow us to have peace. That's a thing to think about. Many times we think that forgiveness means that we have, that we've got to, it means that I can forgive you, but that does not necessarily always mean that I have to like spend every day with you and just be close and be around each other all the time. No, sometimes for the sake of peace, it is good for people to be apart. Sometimes for the sake of the work that you're trying to build, it's best to try to, like, what's your safe distance? What's a safe distance where I can build what I'm building and you can build what you're building, I know I've seen some ministries, like if you go through their ministry training programs, like you have to agree to build your church so many miles away. And I'm not necessarily buying into that or ascribing to that. What I will say is, for the sake of peace, this man, he uses wisdom, and he finds a distance that they're able to dwell in peace. The scriptures tell us, as much as it concerns us, follow peace with all men. Sometimes we have to make the adjustment. A lot of times we want the other person to make the adjustment. I want him to apologize. I want her to say sorry. I want her to move. Sometimes, for the sake of peace, we have to be the ones to make the adjustment. You can call it being the bigger person. I would call it being the wiser person, because nobody's worth your peace. Nobody's worth your peace of mind. There's no person in the earth that is worth your peace of mind. There is no person in the earth that is worth war and confusion. And there always being some kind of issue every time we come around. I love you, but every time you come around, there's an issue, there's a problem. I just can't seem to make you happy. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to find a peaceful distance where we can continue to love on each other. There's nothing in my heart against you. No, I know. I'm not angry. I'm not. We are just going to love one another from the places where we can be comfortable with one another and have peace. So he moved away from there, dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. So he named it Rehoboth, which means wide places or streets. For he said, "At last, the Lord has made room for us, and we will be fruitful in the land." And I love that summation that he has there, because at the end of the day, that's the promise is peace. The promise is shalom. But many times we have to make the adjustment in order to get to that place where we can have that inner peace, where I can finally rest from warring with you and rest from dealing with these issues, fighting family issues, fighting issues on the job. Sometimes I know it can become, you can invest in the warfare so much that you don't realize, like, a small change would have made all the difference. I remember counseling a young lady who she was a part of my staff. I won't say she worked for me, because I was manager. I wasn't, you know, anything much above that. Hey, my brother is here this morning. Good morning. He shows his Jimmy Williams, but that's my brother Tuki. But I remember advising her, like, everything was bad. Everything was bad. Didn't like the work we were doing. Struggled with the people that we were doing. Having issues with coworkers. And it's like, at one point she makes the threat, "Well, you know what? I may just leave." I'm like, that might not be a bad idea for you. Now, my hope is that you can stay here as long as you want to. But what if maybe you've outgrown this assignment? What if maybe it's time for you to do something different? What if it's possible for you to find a place where you don't have to argue and fight and be upset, and you can actually do the work that you have to do the work that you need to do the work that you're good at, but in a place where you don't have to have contention and strife. Well, that's what's happened here. He finds his Rehoboth, he digs his wells there, and he says, "This is the room the Lord has made for us." It says, then he went up from there to Beersheba. Remember, we've talked about Beersheba. We're going to talk about it again. The Lord appeared to him the same night and said, "I am the God, or the Elohim, of your father Abraham. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham." And I think it is really teaching to us that once he makes the moves that he needs to make, and he gets to the place where he's no longer battling strife and confusion, there is a word from the Lord again. Many times our growth, our maturity, sometimes the elevation that we're looking for. Remember, it's God who elevates. He's the one who's going to cause you to rise up. So we're not seeking elevation, but whatever that next thing is that you're looking for, many times that next thing doesn't become clear. That next word that you need, that next instruction that you need, hasn't come, because you're still sitting at an old place. And if he had stayed in those old places, just building wells and sitting just building wells and strife and confusion, he's not at a place where he's able to hear clearly what it is, the promise that the Lord made for him, because you're so busy fighting, you can't get the promise because you're so busy with dealing with the contention and strife. You're starting over, repenting, starting over, going backwards, starting over, falling back, starting over, because we won't leave those places of contention and confusion. We rather stay there and win, stay there and be right, quote unquote. If I was on camera, you'd see the air quotes. But how many, sometimes you can be right and wrong at the same time. Your point may be right, your cause may be right, but maybe your timing is off. Maybe just like a small shift in location from a place where you have confusion to a place where the streets are broad and plenteous, and you can really hear the Lord because you're not battling with flesh and blood. You're not fighting these generation old fights. His daddy fought these fights. Why stay and do it? Okay. So he gets back to this place, Beersheba, that we've looked at. The Lord appeared to him the same night. He gets that word reaffirmed, that promise is reaffirmed. And what does he do there? He built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there. And there Isaac's servants dug a well. So he dedicates this place. This is look, I can call upon the name of my Lord here. I can have the peace that it takes for me to worship. I can have the peace that it takes for me to really dig into my relationship with the Father. And now that I'm no longer battling strife and confusion every day, now that I'm no longer fighting over these wells every day, I can begin to build, because this is a place where that the Lord has provided for me. And so, of course, he settled. And then Abimelech came to him from Gerar with his advisor, Ahuzzath and Phicol, the commander of his army. Isaac said to them, "Why have you come to me, since you hate me and have sent me away from you?" Isn't that how we talk to people once we look? I left you alone. What you want now? I'm out of the way. What do you want? They said, "We see plainly that the Lord has been with you." So we said, "Let there now be an oath between us, even between you and us, and let us make a covenant with you." Notice that once he gets to that peaceful place, now you know what? Let's make a covenant so that this peace can remain. Now that we're no longer fighting every day, let's really solidify this peace. Now we can have the conversations that we need to have. Now we can deal with one another civilly, because why? Because Isaac was wise enough to move and make the move and make the adjustment. So clearly he's not about war. He is pursuing peace with us. Why don't we make an oath that will solidify that? That's when the time is right, when it's time to maybe press the issue about conversations, but not conversations about, hey, let's fight again. Remember how we used to fight? Remember how we used to war? Remember how we used to battle? No, no, no. Now it's, you know what? Let's find a way to solidify this peace so that it remains. And it says, "Let us make a covenant with you that you will do us no harm, just as we have not touched you and have done to you nothing but good and have sent you away in peace. You are now the blessed of the Lord." Then he made them a feast, and they ate and they drank. It says, "In the morning they arose early and exchanged oaths. Then Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace." And we know from previous readings that establishing of the oath generally came with them exchanging something, livestock, goods, whatever the case may be. Not just a promise, but like we actually make an exchange to memorialize the promise. We make that exchange. Many times we close out gatherings with hugs and, see you next times and well wishes until, we gather together again. It says, "Now it came about on the same day that Isaac's servants came in and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, 'We have found water.' So he called it Sheba, oath, which means oath. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day." So before now, Beersheba has been talking about the well that was dug. But now he's able to establish, remember, we're seeing the process of what happens when he gets to that peaceful place. of it went just from a well that was dug to now there's a city. Like, I can build, I can establish because I made the decision to pursue peace. And then I locked in that an oath that secures that peace. And now we can begin to build. And we're going from this just being about finding water to sustain us to this is now a city. It says when Esau, so now we're about to make a little shift here at the end, kind of, sort of, but it sets us up for future chapters. You remember we've got those twins. We've already looked at what's going on with Jacob, with Yaakov. Here's what's going on with the other twin. It says when Esau was 40 years old, he married Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemeth, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. So yeah, this is setting us up for future readings. And I remember when I read this the very first time, many years ago, it bothered me. Like, what was the problem with the Hittites? And then we remember it. When those questions come, I encourage you to get in the scriptures and dig in and find them, and you'll be either reminded of what it is that you need. Use your cross references in your scriptures. Use dictionaries. Use there's so many history books on this area, but we're able to find a quick answer here in the scriptures. And one of the reasons that it's a problem is those were people who they had been promised the land that those people had. So at some point, there's going to be contention. At some point, the land that you have has been promised to us. And so at some point, there's going to be a problem. And these are people who have a different way. These are people that live different from us. But at the end of the day, at some point, there's going to be contention and strife. So one of the indicators on perhaps why it was troubling to them that he married from these people was these were people who lived in Canaan. And if you'll remember, Abraham didn't want his son to have a wife from amongst the Canaanites, and so we see this continuing here. But this is where the telling of the story concerning these Hittites begins in Genesis 15. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. So we see Abram, so we know that was a long time ago. It says, to your descendants, I've given this land from the river of Egypt, Mitzrayim, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. And he tells them, these are the people this is the area. And these are the people that are in those areas: the Kenite and the Kenizzite, the Cadmonite, the Hittite, our girl, and the Perizzite and the Rephaim and the Amorite and the Canaanite and the Girgashite and the Jebusite. And so these are people that it's going to become a point of contention later on. There's going to be some issues and circumstances with these people. And we'll learn a little bit more about the ways of the Hittite that were bothersome, we'll say, is probably a safe word to use until we get there. And so that brings us to the end of Genesis 26, our reading for today. Tomorrow, if the Lord allows, we will be in the 27th chapter, where we will read about Isaac blessing Yaakov. But as I said, be thinking about some of the things that we looked at today. Some of the things that we talked about today, including, finding that place sometimes where it's wise to make that separation and for the sake of peace, not allowing yourself to be mistreated and treated like a second-class citizen. No. But sometimes, is the battle really worth it? Is it worth it to continue fighting and fighting and fighting? And we see that once Isaac makes that move to a location that gives him enough distance, he's able to get peace. We see the Lord revisit him with a promise that was made to him. So waiting on that next instruction will fulfill the previous instruction, but also get to the place where you're free of strife, you're free of confusion, and you're able to hear the instruction from the Lord. You're able to see the moves that need to be made. You're able to further your strategy and just in the way that it happened for him. You're not Isaac, so I'm not calling you Isaac. I'm not putting you in the story. What I am saying is there is a principle: is find that place where peace is possible. Leave that confusion and strife alone. Get out of that strife and confusion and get to that place where you're able to seek the peace that you need to begin to move forward. And you get to that place of peace, you're able to hear the Lord clearly because you're not battling with flesh and blood. You're not dealing with strife and confusion. You have gotten you and your family to a place where peace is possible, where safety is possible. And then we saw the Lord allow that peace to be solidified by an oath. And then once that oath is in place, and we know for certain that we have reached a place of peace, we've heard instruction from the Father, so we know we're in the right direction. Then we move from Beer the well to Beersheba the well to Beersheba the city, and you're able to begin to establish and to build. Sometimes the things that that we know we're called to do, the things that we speaking specifically to those called and chosen with promise on your life. Who said my guy Loki from Disney? You're burdened with glorious purpose. You've got purpose on your life. You've got things to do for the Lord. You've got ground to take. You've got advances to make. You've got things to do. You've got productivity ahead of you. You've got fruit to produce. You've got much more to do than to spend your time dealing with wells of strife and confusion when just a little further down, just a little further over, there's a place where you can enjoy the peace of the land, where you can hear the voice of the Lord and you can worship freely because you're not having to deal with all those things that are contending concerns about safety, concerns about peace, concerns about provision, concerns about this, that, and the other. You can lay all of that down because you made the decision that, you know what, I don't have to fight for my right to be right. I can do what I need to do to get to a place that the Lord can bless. Because sometimes if he steps into that confusion that we're dealing with, sometimes it's going to be you that he's got to deal with. We want him to deal with the other part. It's always the other person that we want him to fix. Fix them, fix them, fix them. Fix Abimelech and his people. I'm not moving. I'm going to keep dealing. I'm going to keep digging right here in confusion. I'm going to keep digging right here in contention when literally just a little bit over. Yep, you got to dig again. But this time when you're digging in the place where you're going to be established. Why do I always have to be the bigger person? Why do I always have to be the one to make the first step? Why do I always have to be the one who makes, extends the olive branch? Why do I always have to be? Because you're the one who loves the Lord. You're the one who doesn't have time to waste sitting in confusion. You're the one who's ready to move the whole situation forward. You're the one. And you can stay there and extend confusion and strife and be right and all those things. Yeah, you can do that. Or you can move just a little bit further, and that's where your peace is. That's where your establishment is. That's where your ability to build and move forward with the work that you're called to do. You can stay and argue, or you can get blessing and move on. Because sometimes just that little bit of humility is what was necessary. Sometimes we're too prideful to be able to move forward. Sometimes because we've got to have our own way. And if you've ever worked with leaders in any capacity, and I've done it professionally and in ministry, you learn very quickly that as a leader, your way isn't always what's going to happen. Once you learn that lesson, then maybe you're ready to build and establish and do something of your own until you've learned how to serve, until you've learned how to be humble. Oh, because being a leader will humble you. Before I became a manager, I had all of these, thoughts and plans on how you, just get things together, fix it, fix it, fix it. And it took me some headbutts and fights and confusion to realize sometimes your job isn't to fix it. Sometimes your job is to find the people that you're sent there for, help them accomplish what it is that they're looking to accomplish, help them to get where it is that they're trying to go, and then move forward. So we've taken a little bit of a sidestep. If you were just here for the scripture reading, God bless you and keep you. May the Lord lift up his countenance towards you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord turn his face, shine his face towards you, and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance and Gives you his shalom. Um, yeah, so that's that part. Now we're going a little further because this situation, I believe, applies in family situations, work situations, but specifically speaking to those looking to move into leadership who are training and preparing for leadership. Sometimes it's learning what your actual assignment in that place is. Many times we stay in places of strife and confusion because we believe the assignment is to quench all of the strife and confusion. Well, they're still experiencing strife and confusion in that place where I was. They're still experiencing those like very same battles, literally very same battles still being fought. So then my assignment wasn't to rid the world of all of that strife and confusion. My assignment was, did I connect to the people I was supposed to connect with to help them get to where it is that they're going, to get to their Shiva, to get to their, what was it? Uh, yeah, Shiva, to get to their place where peace was possible, where they could build. And that's absolutely the truth. So many of the people that I supervised as frontline staff, they're now managers and supervisors. So many of those that I supervised during that time, they've gone to retirement and gone off over into, different streams, and but they found that peace. They found that place. The young lady that I talked with you about, when she got her offer letter from the new job, she came and she thanked me. And there was a little, you know, uh, an attempt at a dig, I believe, but I just heard the blessing in it when she came to say, if you hadn't pushed me the way that you did, I would have stayed in this position forever. And now when she moved on, I believe there was like a $10 or $15,000 pay raise involved in it. And so sometimes you're holding back your own blessings, fighting to be right. A lot of times, most of the time. If the fight is just about who's right and who's wrong, you're holding up your own blessings. So get out your way. Okay. But we're gonna wrap this up because guess what? We gotta go clock in. So you have an amazing day. And if the Lord permits, we'll gather tomorrow for Genesis 27. See you again, same bat time, same bat channel. And I'll talk to you later. See, we know it's time to go because the sun is starting to affect how you see me. Ooh, Pentecostal friends that'll preach. But I'm out of here. Y'all have a good day. Bye, bro. Thank you for checking in with me today. Talk to you later. Bye bye.